welcome back to Room 237, and I'm back with another review of a 70s, 80s slasher throwback, homage, tribute, or a Renaissance slasher, if you will. Now, my last set of videos was on the first three Hatchet films. I still need to get to part 4. And I said in those that the first Hatchet is one of my favorite slashers of that kind, the 80s throwbacks, the Renaissance slashers, and that it is one of the best, and that it's like the most fun kind of celebration of all the tropes. This, I would have to say, is the best. It is the best made. It is the smartest. It is a celebration of slashers and classic horror, but it's also the perfect deconstruction of what makes a slasher film. Tropes, cliches, everything. And done in both found footage and traditional filmmaking. And it's a film that I think is actually kind of underrated. It came out in 2006, and you don't really hear anyone talk about it that much. And it's the sort of black comedy, a mockumentary slasher throwback, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Now, normally I don't upgrade like from DVD to Blu-ray or anything, but I've seen the cover, I think, for Shout Factory, which I think was based on the promotional poster, which looks like an 80s VHS. I love the look of that. Excuse me. And this is this is a deconstruction by way of, say, Scream or Cabin in the Woods. But Scream was sort of a deconstruction of, like, horror fans. Cabin in the Woods was kind of more comedic and just horror as a genre, and more social commentary on how people view horror and what horror is. This one, I think, is the most cleverly and most smartly written one. It just, throughout the whole movie, every time they explain like a certain trope, it comes off as just so clever. It pokes fun at slashers. It gets a philosophical about slashers, and it's just a whole lot of fun. Now, I did say during my Hatchet reviews that these sort of Renaissance slashers kind of came to be around the mid-2000s, with actually both this and Hatchet were in 2006. But I've always said this one is kind of like Halloween, and Hatchet is more Friday the 13th. Because this one is more, I guess, competently made. It is more about characters and is kind of the first of its kind. I mean, we had films like A Malevolence before this, but it's not very gory. It's more about everything else rather than blood and gore. Whereas Hatchet is very fun, is out in the woods, and it just goes balls out with this blood and gore. And I think Hatchet came out a little bit after this. So I've always said, as far as the Renaissance slashers go, this is like Halloween, and Hatchet is like Friday the 13th. The Hatchet was inspired by Friday the 13th, but also just like where they stand in the importance of that genre. Now, it was directed by Scott Glosserman, who also wrote it with David J. Stive, if I pronounced that correctly. And it stars Nathan Basil, who I believe it says introducing, so I'm guessing this was his first film. Yeah, he's only been in 2 other films, 20 Years After and Off the Ledge. Neither one of those I've seen. But he plays our a titular killer, Leslie Vernon. Angela Goethals. I know it's a German name. I'm not sure how she pronounces it. But if you remember from Home Alone, the sister that says Kevin is incompetent, but in French. She's our female lead. Scott Wilson. Uh, I just wanted to get like the main players first. Oh, Scott Wilson is someone else. He plays the Eugene character. But it's... Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. The music is by Gordy Hobb. And the cinematography, Jaron Present. Now, this starts off as a found footage film with this small crew, like this journalist, 2 cameramen, sort of following around this aspiring serial killer and sort of how he's going to set up his killing field. And he's going about it the way of a slasher film. And then at about the halfway point, it switches from found footage when they put the cameras away, decide to save everyone or try, and then it switches over to traditional filmmaking. Another thing that's super fun about this film, other than just how cleverly it tackles the slasher genre, is all of the, like Hatchet, horror and slasher cameos. But this one also has a ton of references and Easter eggs and nods. I mean, I almost wrote all of them down, but I mean, for starters, in this universe, there is no Bundy, Dahmer, or Gacy. The serial killers in this are Freddy, Jason, Michael, Chucky is also referenced. They're real-life serial killers in this. And their killing sprees are really what happened. It is kind of... Because it opens up with her doing her thing, kind of like Heather from Blair Witch. I'm not sure if the whole kind of journalist that talks in kind of a pretentious manner in front of the camera with 2 cameramen is a reference to Blair Witch. I don't know if it's kind of referencing that kind of character makeup, but that's how it is. And Yoshi says in a madman named Jason Voorhees killed dozens over 3 decades in Crystal Lake, where people always fear his next return. And on this street, Elm Street in Springwood, a man committed a crime so heinous that people say that even dreaming of him can kill you. Or, and in Haddonfield of Illinois, a prodigal child, Michael Myers, sent on a killing spree on or around Halloween on 4 separate occasions. So, it talks about it vaguely. You know, it doesn't really say how Jason keeps coming back from the dead and how Freddy can kill you in your dreams. So it tackles it kind of intelligently, I thought. But even during that scene, you know, when she's talking about Elm Street, we see the 1428 house, Nancy's house, with someone taking out the garbage. She wants to interview that person. It's Kane Hodder, of course, who played Jason and Victor Crowley. Zelda Rubinstein, who's been in many things, but most notably the medium from Poltergeist. She plays a librarian in this, and her character's name is a Mrs. Collingwood, which is a reference to Last House on the Left. Robert Englund appears as Doc Halloran, which is a reference to, you know, Danny's nickname Doc, and Dick Halloran from The Shining. And he acts as the Ahab, as Leslie calls him, which is essentially the Dr. Loomis character from Halloween. He does have this one friend named Eugene, who's a retired, I can't remember exactly what he says, a retired person in the business. Now, supposedly, this character of Eugene is supposed to be Billy from Black Christmas. His name was originally going to be Billy, but they decided to make him more of a composite character of earlier slasher killers before the slasher genre uh, came to be. And I really like some of the stuff he says in his first scene, which I'll get to, but there's more references. Uh, Actor Nathan Basil, who plays Leslie, I don't know if this was intentional, if this is what they were going for, or if it's kind of like the Blair Witch connection that I made, like if it's just me thinking that. He does have this ordinary boy next door type look to him. He actually looks kind of like Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates, kind of mixed with Christian Bale from American Psycho, and even sometimes, like with his eyes and his eyebrows, he kind of looks like Dexter. Except for when he's really hyperactive and jumping all around because he's very eccentric. He reminds me of Dane Cook. I'm sorry, but I had to say that. I don't know if the Norman Bates look is what they were going for or if that was incidental. They go to visit his friend Eugene, and on an end table in the living room is the lament configuration from Hellraiser. Right before his killing spree, he's putting on this ointment that will help, swelling and bleeding if he gets hit. In the background is the song "Midnight, the Stars, and You" from The Shining. Also, on the end table, there's blocks that spell out red rum, again from The Shining. All kinds of references. I mean, I'm sure there's something I'm missing. And also, he just has this classic, whenever there's a masked or a costumed type killer, he's got a mask, he's got a signature weapon, which is a hand scythe, based on a legend, like a local legend that he kind of takes on the persona of. So yeah, just a ton of references, Easter eggs. I love how Eugene talks about how, because Leslie's like, tell them about what it was like when you were in the game. And he says, before all these guys, it was very different for guys like me, in the business, which they do say instilling fear. Like, it's not murder to them, it's like the industry of fear. It eventually goes on to say, some guys are good. Jason, Fred, Mike, they all made legends of themselves. They'll never be forgotten. There are a bunch of these, one-hit wonders that everyone forgot about, and are hacks. Pretty much talking about all these, a slew of forgettable standalone slashers, I'm guessing. And then there's just like verbal references and in-jokes told through dialogue. Like, we see Leslie doing some cardio, and he's like, you have no idea how much cardio I have to do, because I got to be able to run for a while without getting winded. And then plus there's that thing to make it look like you're walking, but everyone else is running their asses off. Shows that he's nailed all the windows shut. And Taylor, the lead, is like, would they just bust the windows out? He's like, yeah, you think so, but you'd be surprised. And then, they try to do this one thing with his survivor girl, which he has like a picture of her. I will get to what the context of it, but he has a picture of her aged to look like an old man, and they're like, oh my god, it looks just like her. And he's like, that is her. It's a computer generated image. And I think she says something like, isn't that cheating or something? He says, oh, well, a lot of what we do is a CGI. And it does kind of have the comedy pause to allow the audience to laugh, but the way they do the in-jokes and the references, I mean, this is a fan-servicey film. and not in a very like, oh, it's just fan servicey. It doesn't. It can't stand on its own without it. This is clearly made by someone who loves and understands the genre, and you know is making it for other people that love and understand the genre. Eventually, they're sitting around, they're doing their interviews, and he talks about things like the closet. The closet is a sacred place. It is symbolic of the womb. It's the safest place you can be. I'm guessing it's a reference to how in horror movies and slashers, everyone always hides in the closet, and they can never get to him in the closet. It could be a direct reference to Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween. I'm not sure. He goes on to say how the survivor girl has to be a virgin, and she's going to go through this spiritual journey when she runs through his killing field, this being the apple orchard, towards the end where her innocence will be lost. She'll be reborn, from girl to woman, hell-bent on revenge. And she's going to grab a weapon, one like his, which is a phallic symbol, and going to kill him with his manhood, essentially. So it gets pretty philosophical, which a lot of critics said that's basically what slasher killers were doing in the 80s. They were very phallic and showing their dominance over women with their manhood of a weapon. That was back in the 80s with critics. I didn't know what they were talking about. Here it just gives a nice psychological twist to it, or explanation, I could say. Now, the legend of Leslie Vernon that he's going to play on is because we do find out his name is Leslie Mancuso. He's from Reno. This takes place in Maryland. Because eventually we see Robert Englund, and he shoots at him, calls him Leslie. He's like, I got myself an Ahab, the guy that stands for everything that's good, and will stop at nothing to stop me, even at a personal cost. Even his friends, Eugene and his wife, are so proud of him. Like, you got yourself an Ahab. You got, so proud of you. Oh, crap. I actually forgot where I was going with that. I'm sorry. But anyway. So, yeah, he's just... Oh, the legend. Sorry. There's this legend in the town of Glen Echo that 30 years ago or so, there was this couple that got married. They were the Vernons. On the night of their wedding, Molly Vernon was raped, and then 9 months later, she gave birth to the bastard son of that assault. Because he was a bastard, they just horrifically abused him, made him stay out in the barn or the shed, work in the apple orchard like a slave, tilling the soil with nothing but a hand scythe. Excuse me. And then on the night of the harvest moon, he killed his father with the hand scythe and hung his mother in the apple orchard. When the townspeople found out, they dragged the boy to the falls, threw him off the cliff, where he died. So he's going to take on this kind of legend. And, he shows how he's rigged the house, again, with the nails on the window being shut, taking out the batteries out of the flashlights, and how he pretty much goes through the stages of a slasher film. He's like, first, we're going to have a couple go upstairs. They're going to have sex. I'm going to kill them. I'm going to make them look like they're sleeping. We don't want them found just yet. I've rigged the power. So this other couple will go downstairs where they'll try to fix the power, but also try to get lucky. I'll kill, the boyfriend there. I'll let her run upstairs to alert the others. He basically explains the whole annotations of a slasher film. And I like how when he does that, when he's explaining it to her, we see up close of a girl's chest with her shirt getting unbuttoned and her tits coming out. Because the voiceover is Taylor saying, Leslie, isn't that a little gratuitous? Because 80s slashers are known for its gratuitous nudity. He takes them to the high school to kind of show, you got to find yourself a target group, which Taylor calls victims. He's like, you got to have your survivor girl, but she needs a supporting cast. I mean, like, okay, the jocks are good, but they're a little fast. You look up at the stoners. They're not as fast. They're a little slow. They're good for padding your numbers up. So that's all very interesting. It shows how he sets up the jump scares. Like, he's picked his final girl, which they call Survivor Girl, but the final girl, which is a girl named Kelly who works at a diner. And when it shows her scenes at the diner in the library, that's also where it breaks from found footage. And like how she takes the garbage out at night, she props the door open with a brick. So he's tied fishing line to it so he can pull it away. The door will slam behind her when she thinks she sees him. Just kind of showing how, like, a slasher villain might set up these jump scares. And how he's strategically going to place all these bodies, like, in the tool shed. So when someone goes to get a weapon, the body will fall out. Or out in the barn when they go to hide. Just a really clever look at the inside of a slasher film from the killer's point of view. And this is an aspiring killer. I actually put this off for a while because there's so much in this movie to talk about, so much references and how they explain certain things about the slasher genre that I was worried I was going to leave stuff out. And yeah, I'm not really sure what the camera crew thought they were getting into. I mean, like, they agreed to do all this, but it's not until the first two victims are killed do their conscience come up and they're, okay, we gotta stop this. We gotta help these kids. But not when he kills poor Zelda Rubinstein in the library. Which I know that was his goal, but that's when Robert Englund first shows up, because Zelda Rubinstein lets Kelly stay late in the library, so he wants to plant the seed of his existence and cause some paranoia. Also, Eugene says he should get a red herring, which is a early victim, I guess. I always thought a red herring was someone to take suspicion off of the real killer, think it's someone else. Maybe just in Giallo terms, but... So he's made this fake news article that has the CGI picture of her with a great uncle of hers. At least someone with the same last name. CGI picture of her as an old guy. And the article says that he was the one that raped Leslie Vernon's mother. So he plants it in the library. She finds it. She goes to Zelda Rubinstein to find the rest of the article, which is on a microfiche. Remember the old horror movies that had microfiche? That was awesome. Then Zelda tells her the legend of Leslie, and that's when he pops up in his get-up, which I really do like the look of Leslie Vernon. He's got torn, ripped up overalls and like a thermal shirt. This blue mask that it kind of resembles a skull, but with like a frowny face and like curly, frizzy hair. His weapon is a hand scythe. He's barefoot. I really do like the look of Leslie Vernon. And then from there, they almost screw up when Taylor wants to go talk to Kelly at the diner, but then Ahab, or Halloran, approaches them. He gets pissed. and says, all right, he was my psychiatrist in Reno, but I left there to come here to do this. And that's when we get more explanations, like about the closet being the womb, and the apple orchard serving as like the birthing canal, which will serve as the rebirth from girl to woman and revenge. And then, he talked about how he's gonna flatten all the tires, take the spark plugs out of the cars. That's why they never start in horror movies. He kills the first couple having sex. He says goodbye to them outside, and that's when they decide, nope. They put the cameras in the van, get out of found footage, and they try to divert Leslie's plan. Which, another thing that's really smart is, we as the audience are supposed to know the plan because he described the plan to them, therefore us. But as Taylor says later on, he's accommodating his plan for the extra people in the house. He knew that we were gonna sort of betray him, and so he's just gonna kill all of us. So either that's his plan B. Later on, we find out he knew all along, and he was kind of feeding them bullshit. And he's actually, we're seeing his real plan A. So the bodies don't necessarily pop up in the same places that he described. Like all the kids weren't supposed to go out to their cars just yet, but they say the cars are sabotaged, but not our van, so let's all go out. That's where they find the first couple that had sex in their van. Because when they try to prove it to him, they go up to the bedroom and the bodies are gone. So we see his... And I thought that was really smart. Like, because now you gotta trick the characters that already know the plan. And everyone really gets scared when they walk in on Kelly having sex, showing that she's not the virgin. And she's actually one of the first to die because she tries to escape through a second-story window and falls to her death. But yeah, this is not a gory movie. Again, there is one kill where he's got, I don't know if they're garden pruners or what, but yeah, he sticks it in the guy's chest, closes it, like takes the heart out, and puts it in his hand. But it's a lot like Halloween. Very little blood, not really any gore, but it's so rich in everything else. Like, I also love the lighting of the apple orchard, like the fog over like all the apple trees and everything. Great looking set and production design. And so that's when they realized that Taylor was destined to be the final girl. Unfortunately, Robert Englund doesn't really get to do too much Dr. Loomis stuff. Shows up in the library, shows up at the diner. And then as soon as he shows up in the barn, I mean, he gets the scythe right to his side, then he falls down. And then that's it. I mean, he shows up at the very, very end as one of the survivors, but... Oh, also, I like how... Another thing that he does is in the tool shed, axe, pickaxe, sledgehammer, he's either, shaved the handle down so it'll snap, or loosened the head of the sledgehammer so it'll fly off. So he says, unless they get lucky with their first whack, they're all sabotaged. And they're all closer to the door, not in the way back. Also, he says that the tool shed is like the closet. It's a sacred area. If Kelly were to go in there, she'd be fine. Anyone else goes in, they're dead. But and she runs through the apple orchard. She has her sort of rebirth moment. Ends up with him in the this one shed that has the apple juicer, which we do see him use. And it is kind of foreshadowed because he's crushing apples. And then right before they leave to get ready for the night of killing, he raises the Crusher up, and the camera kind of pans down. So kind of foreshadowed that's how he's going to get it. And she does. She hits him with something. He goes down. She throws, headfirst into the Crusher, starts crushing him. He rips his mask off and is like, I knew you were the one. She crushes him to death, sets the barn on fire, and we see that her, Robert Englund, and one of the camera guys are the only survivors. I also like how you have Taylor and the two camera guys trying to keep up with Leslie's plan and trying to save everyone by, trying to divert from his plan or cut things early or skip ahead. But he's already planned everything, he's already planned everything ahead of time. Again, I don't know what they thought they were getting into. Did they not think he was really going to go through with it? Or was it just so surreal that when he finally did kill, it just shocked them and they thought, wait, I really can't do this? Also, he's good at predicting, because when they're at the library, he's like, she's going to go to the microfiche, start reading the article, and she's going to ask the librarian for the legend, and she's going to say, don't worry, child, it's just an old story. And she does, which is a typical horror movie line. And then right after he kills that first couple, he drags everyone outside. He's like, you have a look on your face. She's like, what look? He says, we can't just stand here and let you do this look. And then right after he walks off, she says, we can't just stand here and let him do this. And they're like, isn't that what he just said that you would say? And I do like the end credits. It's black and white security footage in a morgue. We see the mortician pull his gurney out, and then he's getting ready. He just sits up like Michael Myers and looks over at him. Put to the song Psycho Killer by Talking Heads, which is a great song. And that's the movie. I'm sure there's other things I left out, and I really just kind of explained the movie instead of really saying what I liked. But I love this whole movie. I think it is incredibly smart. It's a very clever way to make a slasher about slashers while also being very original, but also kind of poking fun, but also embracing everything about slashers. I like this way more than Scream. I do like the first two Scream films, but I like this way more than Scream. I like this 1,000 times more than Cabin in the Woods. As far as those deconstruction horror films, especially with slashers, this is the best. Now, I know for years, director Scott Glosserman and Nathan Basil, who plays Leslie, have come out and talked about the possibility of a sequel because it shows he's still alive during the end credits. And Basil said that they shouldn't make a film unless it's as good or better than this one. It shouldn't be anything less than inspired, which I agree with. Glosserman did say that there is or was a script, and this was back in 2017. I mean, there have been talks about a sequel even a couple years after this came out, and this was, 16 years ago. But as of 2017, Glosserman did say, there's some things in the screenplay that feel a bit dated. He says, I feel like we captured the essence of what horror was at the time that we wrote it, but nowadays it would seem either like a period piece or, very dated, and I'm not ready to bring that to current day yet. Which is kind of weird because he's bringing the 70s and 80s to modern day in this. So maybe I'm not quite sure what he means by that. But to be honest, either because so much time has passed now, I'd rather not see it. But this is just, this is a quit while you're ahead type scenario. This movie was so well written, so well executed, very, very clever, well acted by everybody, especially the killer, Nathan Basil. And just so great all the way around that even if a sequel is really good, it sort of does what this does, but for slasher sequels, like it deconstructs the sequel. I'd still rather it just be a standalone film. It is one of those lightning in a bottle type things. I really love this film. Definitely one of my favorite horror films of the first decade of the 2000s. Probably one of my favorite horror films since the year 2000. Might even be my favorite horror film of 2006. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is. But yeah, as far as Renaissance slashers go, Hatchet may be the most fun, fun in like an entertaining way. Like there's more going on, there's more blood, there's more gore. The comedy is more upfront, whereas the humor is more drier and more. There's a lot more in jokes than say Hatchet, but yeah, I love everything about this film, and even though it is underrated, I think maybe even underseen, and if it stays as a standalone film, I would love to see the character Leslie Vernon sort of be up there with people like Victor Crowley, Jigsaw, the Creeper, I guess the girl from The Ring, the Annabelle doll, and I'm even naming ones I don't like, but as, the modern horror icons. But yeah, I love this film. Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. I'm sure there's a lot more that I didn't get into, or references I didn't mention, or things I didn't really go into depth with. In which case, you're just going to have to check it out for yourself, because this movie is just packed, start to finish, with with everything that a horror fan will love, especially a slasher fan. But yeah, Rise of Leslie Vernon, thank you for watching.